Hello. My name is Andre, and welcome to another demo of Border0. Today, we're going to talk about securing database access and also making it really easy to still access this database. We all have databases, whether they live on-prem in a private data center or in Amazon. They're very important, and hence they're often well protected. And by that, I mean they typically are behind many layers of firewalls. They might even be running in private networks, such as, for example, very commonly nowadays, a RDS instance in a private Amazon VPC. And so that brings the first challenge. How do you then access these databases still, since they're running in an isolated network? The second challenge we often hear from folks is the use of shared database credentials. So it's still very common for people to use shared database credentials, which has all kinds of challenges, obviously, not in the least making it very hard to rotate them, keeping track of who has access to them. And as a result, also, if you have the ability to even record queries, to figure out who executed what queries, because they're all executed as the same shared user account. So that's all very challenging. So using Border0, this is a lot easier. And so what I'm going to show you today is how we solve some of these challenges. And what you're essentially getting is very easy access to private databases, without the need for VPNs. Access to databases can be controlled using flexible policies. So it's very easy to define who has access to what, from where, and when. What you also see is that users can access these databases using their single sign-on credentials. So you don't need to provide them with the actual database credentials. So no more need for shared credentials. We'll show you a detailed log of sessions, exactly who connected to the database, from where and when. And because we know exactly who executed what queries, we can show you a query replay and also tell you exactly who did that. So that's pretty powerful, and I think it solves some of the long-standing challenges with databases. So let's dive right in. So I'm already set up a database running in a private network. Assume that's maybe a private RDS instance in a private VPC, and we're going to access that just using our RDS or our SSO credentials. So the first thing we need to do is actually provision a service in Border0 of type database. So we call that a database socket. So that's pretty easy. Take a look. Let me open up my shell, and we'll say, create this socket of type database. This is the name it generated, and as you can see, this is the default policy that's been attached. We'll take a look at that policy in a little bit, but it basically defines who has access to this database. So now what we need to do is connect this database socket up to our Anycasted infrastructure. And so now you can see it's wired up and it's ready for use. So that literally was 1 minute of work. Pretty powerful. Cool. So now we're going to change personas. Up until now, I was sort of the administrator. Now I'm going to be an end user. I'm someone on your engineering team that needs access to the database. So for that, I'll just start a new shell. And so one of the things I'll do here is Border0 client DB. And so this shows me all the databases that I have access to as an engineer. So in this case, I have two, and this is the one that we just created. So I'll select that. And the first thing is ask me, okay, what is the name of the database? What's the database schema? Since I already connected to this before, it remembers and it's employees. It is essentially a demo database that I have here. It also asks me what client would you like to connect or use to connect to this database. And as you can see, we integrate with some of the more common database clients, MySQL, MySQL Workbench, dbeaver, and as well as some of the Postgres versions. So since I'm on the CLI, I'll use MySQL. And now I'm connected to this database. So let's take a look, show tables, select star from employees. Great. So again, this is all dummy data, but you can see how easy that was. And this all happens using my single sign-on credentials. This is great if you are a database junkie, but a lot of us like visual tools as well. So we also have a Border0 desktop app, as you can see here. And let me filter out all the database sockets here. So same thing, I'll say connect. And in this case, say I want to use MySQL Workbench. So I'll just want to show you how easy that is, how we integrate with some of the more popular existing tools. So this will start MySQL Workbench. There it is. And now I'm connected to that. Let me just double click on this. And now I can execute queries from MySQL Workbench. Again, using the tools that I am most familiar with, your engineers are most familiar with, so that we don't sit in their workflow. They can still use all the tools that they're used to. But in fact, I'd argue it's even simpler than before because you don't need to jump on the VPN, etc. All right, so that was very powerful. So we saw how easy it was to connect to it using CLI tools or the visual client. So now we'll change personas back to sort of the administrator persona because we want to see who connected to these database sockets and what they were doing. So I'm here in the Border0 portal, and I can see the socket that we just created. So first, we'll take a quick look at the policy. So these are the policies attached to this service. In this case, I only have one, so I'll click on that. And so this is a document that defines who has access to this service. So what you can see here is anyone that authenticates using their SSO credentials and has an email address ending in border0.com, or any of these contractors, contractor@gmail.com or barry@example.com. We can also specify IP addresses or countries. So in this case, say, hey, you can only go in if you're from Canada, for example, and also only between these dates. So that's the policy example. So you can add multiple policy documents to a service, and so it's very easy to create ephemeral access, for example, for particular users. Now, let's take a look at sessions. So you saw me connecting to this database twice. It's actually interesting once you start looking at this. MySQL Workbench actually under the covers creates 2 sessions. So that's very interesting. Now let's take a look what happened. So the first session was a MySQL CLI version, right? So you can see exactly what we executed. We said, hey, I want to use the employee database. We typed in show database, show tables, and we did select star from employees, right? So that's exactly what I executed, and you can see it was indeed me. You can see what timestamp all that happened, and if you want to, you can even play that sort of as a video back. Now, the other query was MySQL Workbench, and Workbench does a lot of queries under the covers to render the views that it does, and we can see all of that here as well, either in a video or sort of as a text dump. All right, so with that, I think we have hopefully a pretty good overview of how easy it was to create access to these databases, no matter where they live, whether they're right on the internet and anyone can access them, which I hope you don't have, or if they're in a very isolated network, such as, for example, a private VPC. We saw how we can help your engineers get access to that using just their SSO credentials. We saw that I, as an engineer, didn't have to know the database credentials at all. So we can eliminate these shared database accounts. It was super easy for me to get going because either I used the CLI to discover what databases I have access to and start my favorite database application, or the desktop app and started, in this case, MySQL Workbench. So we've integrated some of the more commonly used database tools such as MySQL or Postgres CLI, or as well as Workbench or dbeaver. So that's a lot easier for users as well. Finally, we saw how the administrator can see exactly who accessed what database from where and when. And not only that, we were also able to actually watch back exactly what queries were being executed by that user. So hopefully this gave you a good overview of how easy it is to get started with Border0 and how easy it is to give people database access without having to give them the credentials of those databases, just having them use their SSO credentials and without the need for actual VPNs. Actually reduces the friction for engineers, and for you as an administrator, actually gives you a lot more visibility than you had before. So if you're interested, feel free to sign up for free using our community edition, where you can do exactly what I did today. And if you're curious how to do that, follow this link here, which is the example documentation of how to do that, and also show you can do the same for Postgres or SSH or HTTP. Well, thank you very much. Hope you give it a try. Let us know how it goes, and we'd love to hear from you.